Let me add my welcome to Andrew's at the beginning of the service. My name's also Andrew, and I'm going to speak today just on one sentence from early on in the Bible, from the first book of Genesis. Oh, there we are. Could you reattach that? Maybe if it, or maybe just hold it might be best. That was just my attempt to bring a light from home, but I haven't attached it properly. So there's a dramatic beginning. See if you can stick that in. Sorry, give us a moment. This will be safer if we do it properly. There we are. Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying, welcome. I'm going to speak on just one sentence from the very early on in the Bible. And it's printed there on the order of service. Maybe you could look down at it. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And it says this: I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. We're going to think about that in a moment together. I wonder how planned ahead you are for Christmas. I have got 3 Secret Santas I'm taking part in. 1 family one and 2 different work ones, my 2 different jobs. And I have to say, I haven't bought any of the presents yet, and the first one is on Tuesday. Maybe you're doing a bit better than me planning ahead. But it turns out that God, when it comes to Christmas, he really planned very, very far ahead. You might think that 2,000 years ago, the birth of Jesus was long ago, but God began his plans for that about 3 times longer ago, maybe even from further ahead than that. But this promise that he first makes in the book of Genesis about Christmas. There's a song that the children at Grace Church Greenwich like to sing that begins a long, 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 long time ago. And I want to add another couple of long, longs to that. Let's go back a long, 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 long time ago to the very beginning of the human race, the dawn of humanity. Here we have the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, the first human couple, and a serpent who represents the devil or evil intruding into the garden. Now, all religions, all philosophies, all ideologies have their origin story. From the ancient ones, like the Gilgamesh epic of Mesopotamia, and you can find part of that in the British Museum, part of it in other museums around the world, to the Eastern ones. Apparently in Hinduism, one of the creation stories is that Brahman pluck a lotus flower from Lord Vishnu's navel and then split the petals into 3 to make the heavens, the sky, and the land. Or there's another one where Brahman split himself in half into 2, into a male and a female, and then gave birth to the rest of the world. There are the secularist ones. One of the most famous ones, maybe you saw this or read it yourself, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. There was a time a few years ago when everyone was reading this on the tube, and we read it on the Grace Church Greenwich staff team as well. And it is a kind of secularist origin story, how he came to be, requiring nothing but blind chance, a big bang, and then billions of years of purposeless and unguided evolution. Here we are. Of course, some people think that that must be the most scientific because it's the most secular. I asked a friend who's a biology professor what he thought about the scientific argument of Harari's book, Sapiens, and he replied rather unkindly, was there one? As in, it's not really a scientific account, it's just a story that we tell about our origins. Well, the Bible's got a very different story of how it began. And I think actually a much more compelling story. Rather than beginning with nothing, beginning by accident, beginning with impersonal chance, right at the start we begin with a God. That already actually gives you a solution to the physicist's headache, because if there was a Big Bang, you've got to ask yourself, who made the Big Bang go bang? Well, we start with a God. He's able to light the blue touch paper, and then the universe comes into being. And we begin with the things that are most important to us. We begin with the personal, rather than the personal being a sort of accident that emerges out of only the material. We begin with the moral, rather than good and evil just being arbitrary labels that we give to states of random chance. We begin with the beautiful, rather than finding it difficult to account for why we find some things in this world so delightful. We begin with the personal, the moral, and the beautiful in a garden, a marriage in a garden, with a God who loves us, with an enjoyment of all that he's made. But also in the garden, in the Bible story, there is a serpent or a snake. And this serpent represents evil itself. Now, I don't know why you should choose a snake for that symbol. Well, actually, I do know, because if you've ever seen the Planet Earth episode in the Galapagos about the Galapagos race of snakes versus the iguana, you'll know that it is probably the most terrifying bit of footage ever filmed. And it's actually, it's real life. It's not even a horror movie CGI. Snakes are just quite terrifying things. And I suppose even more so in a Middle Eastern culture where you have venomous snakes and you don't have anti-venom. Snakes are terrifying. And here the snake represents Satan. And all he is about is lies and murder. What the devil has always been about. And he wrecks this paradise. Man and woman in a beautiful place, enjoying friendship with the God that made them, and everything is a paradise, but it's lost because evil enters. And Eve, the first woman, is deceived by the serpent, and death enters the world, and all is spoiled. People have suggested that this perhaps is quite a patriarchal story. Just typical of those Christians to pin all the blame for everything going wrong on the first woman. And it's a chapter, I guess, criticized and hated by feminists. But I want to fight back, because actually I came across this picture, which is going to come up on the slide, recently. It's drawn in crayon in 2003 by a Cistercian nun from Mississippi. And I want you to look at it and see if you can work out what's going on, because it's I think it's a brilliant picture, but it requires a little bit of thought. See if you can work out who's who before I tell you. So on the left of the picture, we have Eve, the first woman, and she is clothed there in sort of first woman clothes, primitive clothes, and she is weeping because she's been tricked by the devil. She's been deceived, and paradise has been lost, and death has entered the world. Everything is spoiled. And there's the serpent coiled around her ankle and celebrating his victory. And then on the right, have you worked out who that is on the right? This is Mary. Traditionally, she wears blue. I don't know whether that's what she wore. I don't think the color of her clothes is told us in the Bible, but traditionally in Roman Catholic art, she wears blue, and she's pregnant because she's got baby Jesus inside her. And if you look down at the bottom of the picture, you see she is crushing the head of the serpent. I think it's quite a brilliant picture. And it just reminds me that this is kind of the Christmas story from a female angle. Yes, the woman was involved in the tragedy that led the world into ruin. And actually, a man was involved as well. Adam gets most of the blame for what happens. But a woman is also involved in the story of redemption and rescue. It's not just true in the book of Genesis. If you were to read on in the Christmas story, if you see what happens to Jesus when he grows up, it's amazing to discover what dignity is given to women in the biblical accounts. I was just going through it earlier this week. And as I was reading, I found that in the first 3 chapters, most of the heroes are women in this book. And we have Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mum. We have Mary, Jesus' mum. We have Anna, the prophetess. As we go on in the book, we find that there's a widow, a poor widow, who shows up all of the men in their religion by actually loving God really from her heart. We discover that when Jesus dies and rises again, the first witnesses on the scene to this most important event of the whole story are all women. It is a story that is profoundly pro-women. And I love this picture that shows that it's from the womb of a woman, a young woman, 2,000 years ago, that comes the baby who will crush the head of the serpent. That is the first ever Christmas message. And thousands of years before Jesus was born, God said this: I will put enmity. It means ongoing hostility. I'm going to create a fight, a battle between your offspring, the woman's offspring, and the serpent's offspring. He shall bruise your head, you shall bruise his heel. The Christmas story, when first promised, is a story of the crushing of evil, the destruction of evil. I was privileged last night to go to dinner with somebody who's about to become a British ambassador, one of the most sort of famous to-be people that I've met. And it reminded me of a story, not about this British ambassador, I hasten to add, probably a fictional story, about a British ambassador in an unspecified country who was contacted by the national media of that country asking him, what would you like for Christmas? You know what? That's very generous of them. And he thought, well, I better not ask for anything too greedy. So he said, oh, that's very kind. I would love a box of crystallized fruit. Anyway, he didn't think much more of it until the Christmas edition of the newspaper came out. And he turned to the second page and it said, we asked the ambassadors from the different embassies around the world what they would like for Christmas. And the Japanese ambassador said, we'd like world peace. The American ambassador said prosperity for all of the nations. And the British ambassador said a box of crystallized fruit. But would you even dare to ask for the end of evil in the world? Certainly, of the 3 Secret Santas I'm participating in, no one has asked for anything as big as that. It just seems too big, doesn't it? For evil to be destroyed. In our first reading, we heard the prophet Isaiah, some 700 years before Jesus, speaking about people walking in great darkness, seeing a light. And he goes on to give a picture of war ending. Now, people love to celebrate darkness and light at Christmas. And we've got lots of lights here, one that almost fell off and maimed Isaac, sorry about that, in the front row. But even more lights elsewhere in London. So I think Regent Street has 45 angels this year. Oxford Street beats it with 5,000 stars. But in first place, trouncing both Regent Street and Oxford Street, are Lee and Paul Brailsford, the builders from Bristol, whose Christmas light display this year has 50,000 lights. And we're told, and I quote from the newspaper, the display includes lights as well as life-size Santas, plural, elves, and a large reindeer family. I had a look at the picture. Trust me, it is not a very tasteful thing. But this image of light coming that banishes darkness has been a favorite Christian theme at this time of year. The end of evil, the dispelling of the murkiest things that happen in this world. And Isaiah goes on to speak about war. I looked at the latest statistics on the BBC. The estimate is 13,000 Ukrainian soldiers so far this year have been killed. Perhaps 18,500 Russian soldiers. Isaiah said that every boot of the tramping warrior, every garment rolled in blood, would one day be fuel for the fire as this son is born, this baby comes to crush the head of the serpent. I did the maths. That's about 63,000 battle boots used so far in Ukraine. Even more than the number of lights in Lee and Paul Brailsford's Christmas display. There is real evil in this world. There is real evil. And yet the promise comes of a baby who will defeat evil. Look at that sentence one more time. I will put enmity between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Here's the promise that a baby born of a woman one day in the future will be the one that crushes the serpent, destroys the devil. And yet, as you read it, you discover that the serpent crusher doesn't come unscathed out of the encounter. Now, when I first read it, I thought, oh, well, to have a head wound is a lot more serious than an ankle wound. So the devil comes off worse because he gets, stamped. And the serpent crusher, the seed of the woman, the the child that's to be born, the baby Jesus, is just going to get an ankle wound. And then I realized I just misread it, because this is a story about snakes and human beings. And the reason that the snake gets a head wound is because it's down there by your ankle and you crush it. But when a snake bites you in an ankle, that's pretty serious. You know, it's not a serious head injury versus a minor ankle injury. It's just the way that you kill each other. You kill a snake by crushing its head. It kills you by biting your ankle and putting in the venom. And that's the point of this picture, that it really does cost the child of the woman, the son of the Virgin Mary, the Lord Jesus, to win this battle. He will destroy the devil, but out of it, he himself is killed. The place where Jesus will crush the serpent is as he dies on a Roman cross, as he's executed for the sins of the world. And so this promise of Christmas, the first ever promise of Christmas, is also the first ever promise of Easter, the day when Jesus is butchered, murdered, as he takes on himself the evil and the sin of the world. I think I've read before the poem by Steve Turner, which I know a Christian poet, I know one of his friends is sitting in the back of the audience. It's called Christmas is Really for the Children. Let me read you the beginning of it. Christmas is really for the children, especially for children who like animals, stables, stars, and babies wrapped in swaddling clothes. Then there are wise men, kings in fine robes, humble shepherds, and a hint of rich perfume. Easter is not really for the children, unless accompanied by a cream-filled egg. It has whips, blood, nails, a spear, and allegations of body snatching. It involves politics, God, and the sins of the world. It's not good for people of a nervous disposition, he says. And it's just a reminder, isn't it, that we peel back the tinsel. It's not just a feel-good time of year. It's not just a time of increased commercial sales, beginning at Black Friday and then going on to Cyber Monday and then, of course, Christmas and then, of course, the January sales. It is a story about a baby who came to fight evil and lost his life in the process. Easter, similarly, isn't really about bunnies or eggs, but about a baby who'd grown up and was nailed to a cross in order to defeat evil. I will put enmity between you and the woman, says God, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Well, you might think it's been 2,000 years and Jesus hasn't really delivered on this promise. I mean, a baby was born in Bethlehem, but evil is still very much here, isn't it? Everywhere. And the Bible knows that. In fact, the crushing of the serpent is a work in progress. And we read elsewhere in the New Testament that the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. But there's one thing already that Jesus has won. One power of Satan that has been defeated. Satan can no longer stop you finding forgiveness, finding freedom, finding eternal life. The serpent was a liar and a murderer, but he can no longer kill you forever. Because the thing that this baby has brought is the possibility of reconciliation with God, freedom from the tyranny of Satan, to belong to the God who once walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, to be restored to relationship with him, to know purpose and meaning and forgiveness, and one day a perfect world from which Satan will be banished entirely. Quite poignantly, earlier this year, just a couple of months ago, a friend of some of ours died of a brain tumour. Came upon him very suddenly, was never really been ill in his life, and then started to have headaches. And 3 weeks of headaches, he thought, this is a bit odd, I should go to the doctor. And it was already far advanced. And about 3 weeks after that, he died. He had a little bit longer than he expected. They thought he'd not come out of the coma he was in. But he rallied and had a week or so of real lucidity and ability to speak to people, and was giving out just again and again and again little Christmas messages, Christian messages of forgiveness and hope and life and the end of evil to people all around the hospital. Satan is crushed, destroyed. He can't take away the possibility of forgiveness. This man who died of cancer died with a great confidence of the life and light and relationship that baby Jesus had offered him. We heard just a couple of weeks ago in our church of friends in Moldova, just across the border from Ukraine, who have been involved in welcoming hundreds and hundreds of refugees in conjunction with local churches there. And they told of mass baptisms, people turning to Jesus across Ukraine, receiving forgiveness, liberty, the prospect of eternal life. Yes, Satan hasn't been entirely banished from this world yet, but his power is broken. There's nothing he can do today to stop you from being forgiven, to experience friendship with the God that made you, who once walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, and once will again walk in the garden of a beautiful new creation in which there are no tears or pain anymore. The first ever promise of Christmas, because God planned really, really far ahead. A long time ago, God said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. I'm really grateful for you listening today, especially if you're a visitor and all this is new to you. You're very welcome amongst us. Love you to consider more about this story. And there's different ways you could do it. You're welcome here at Grace Church any Sunday. We say we're a church for skeptics and inquirers and believers, and we really are. There's all sorts of people who come Sunday by Sunday. Do come with your questions, come and hear a bit more. Do read the next part of the story, what happened when Jesus grew up, the story of how he came to defeat and crush evil. Do come and chat to me afterwards. I've got a little book I'd love to give you. But thank you so much for coming, and happy Christmas.